Hi, Kenny here, and this is a continuation of every camera I've used, part 2. The follow-up, and if you watched part 1, I'm just going over, in chronological order, a collection of images, collection of cameras I've used in the past, starting with the Sony FD91. I followed that up with the Canon PowerShot G1, and then the Canon 5D Classic. So the next camera that came into my possession was the EOS 1D Mark III. And this camera was a beast. Partly the reason I got the camera was because, the natural aspiration at the time was to, upgrade to a full-fledged professional camera. So I took out a lease on this camera, actually. That was the first and only time I've ever actually taken out a lease and bought a camera. This was when I was very heavily into photographing events and weddings, and this camera was, it delivered as promised. I had no complaints about that. And the fact that it wasn't quite full frame was okay with me. I did enjoy the image quality that came out of it. A couple things I did note about that camera. Man, it could focus. It would rip focus and run laps around the 5D Mark 1. And it was a heavy duty performer. It did everything as promised. It was heavy as hell. But the one thing I did remember on that camera, I took way too many shots than necessary. And I just did so because the shutter was, not that it was sticky, but man, if you just wanted to run the gamut on frame rates, you simply just did it. It was a thoroughbred of a camera. It was a benefit and a drawback. And the drawback was I would go home and look at my shots, and there would just be so many. I remember the file size being pretty decent, so it was so easy to take too many shots. But overall, good camera. I really enjoyed it. The only time I constantly have this reminder from these cameras that are full-size cameras. The issue is that when you mount a lens and you go and put it somewhere, like in a backpack, the configuration gets a little weird because it's got the battery grip combined with the camera itself. It's all built in, one body. And chances are you might be using like a 2.8 zoom, a 2470. I always found those cameras hard to place in a backpack or camera bag. So this is the first time I've came into that encounter. But otherwise, great camera. It's just a little awkward to carry. It was less awkward to carry, but more awkward to stuff in a backpack or a shoulder bag. If that makes any sense. And the one last thing I want to add about the Canon 1D Mark III was that it made me realize that I was at a point where, even though I kind of back then had the aspirations to have a full-fledged professional camera, I did find this camera really awkward to carry day-to-day as a personal camera, and it was simply too big to be a practical camera, and I kind of dislike that about this camera. And it's not a negative for the camera. It's probably just me not comfortable with it, because it is a bulky camera. And like I said, it is tricky to put in a bag or shoulder bag. So your options when you just want to bring it with you is kind of limited. So that was one thing that I did experience first time with this camera of this size. So the next camera that came into my possession was the Canon EOS 5D Mark II. Now, I was working with probably my 1D Mark III at the time, and what happened was I'm pretty sure the 5D Classic, the first version, was getting high up on its shutter count and getting a little aged. So I went to upgrade the original 5D Classic to the Mark II. So pairing that alongside my 1D Mark III, it just had better quality. I mean, it was a full frame, so that was fantastic. the image quality was amazing. And I still know some people that still actively use the 5D Mark II. So, you know, the 5D is knocking it out of the park. And I found that to be a great replacement for the 5D Mark I. It was more of a personal camera that I could carry around to places. Throwing light primes on it, it was just easy and ready to go. I did find a lot of times when I was pairing it, and at the time I had it with my 5D. I had it with my 1D Mark III. I was always reaching for primes if I was going to carry it as like a personal lightweight companion camera, and I found that I gravitated towards the 5D a lot more after that. It simply was a good camera for the pixel count and a lightweight camera compared to the 1D Mark III. I believe this was the first camera that did video extensively. I am quite sure the 5D Mark II is the one that started the whole video trend for me. And I was, at the time, I was kind of not sure about it because I was like, well, why am I paying for like a really expensive camera for capability, video capability that I wasn't really into or going to use, and just felt kind of weird to be spending that kind of money. But it turned out to be a great camera. I remember it being really good image quality, did video. It was an evolved 5D Mark I, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. So 5D Mark II, fantastic camera. Really is an evolution on the 5D Mark I. And there's, even current day, when you look at the cameras like the 5D Mark IV, they're all fantastic. Next up, we got the Nikon D700. So this is at a point in time where I just made the switch from Canon over to Nikon. There was a couple of things. I think the Nikon was really just up and coming. I think they started with the D3, and then the D7, its little sibling, had the same sensor, was just built really well. Quite heftier than the 5Ds at the time. And the reason I made the switch was actually just kind of slim down my lens collection. At this point, I was still shooting film quite actively. I had a whole lineup of Nikon analog film bodies, cameras like the D100, F70, F100 I meant, and F4, some manual lenses. And I was still using a lot of manual Nikon film stuff. And this is just, Nikon just became very up and coming. And I think they used to have like a color balance issue with the D2X. This came along, the D3, D700, that solved all of that. And I also found whenever I did try Nikon flashes, they worked out really well. I do still believe it to this day and age that Nikon owns the flash game. External flashes, they talk to each other. You can use like 70, 30 flashes, I think. Like insane numbers. But the D700 was a workhorse for me. I shot so much on that camera. I carried with me everywhere. Never had an issue with that D700, and it was didn't look back. Didn't look back from to my Canon days anymore. I do miss that rear wheel for that shutter speed. I do miss it. But the D700 was fantastic, and it was just built like a tank. No complaints about that camera. You can still see people talk about it today. Like, the color quality was just amazing. Here's a sample here that I photographed at the marijuana rally in Toronto, downtown, at the what used to be called Dundas Square. I'm not sure what it's called anymore. But, I shot a few of these back in the day, and they were quite a big deal. No one makes a fuss about marijuana anymore, but I thought this was kind of cool back in the day, looking back. D700, great camera, and you could shoot all day on its battery. The files were light. It was, I believe at the time, a bit of a step down from the 5D Mark II, which I found the files to be a little big, and I'm not the kind of person who edits extensively. I try to minimize all my editing, especially when it comes to like weddings, event work, anything that involves that kind of volume. So it was fantastic. It felt like I had a new computer. Edits were going quick. Great camera. I do kind of miss it, but I don't know if I like the weight, because if you slapped a professional 2.8 lens on this camera and a flash, it was insanely heavy. And I found myself gravitating to just putting light primes on it if it was my personal use and I wasn't working with it. But man, you felt it when you slapped on a 2.8, 24 70. It was insanely heavy. Yeah, D700, fantastic camera. I would say probably one of my all-time favorites. So this wraps up part 2 of all the digital cameras I've used. Stick around if you feel like listening some more. I will continue on with these little segments. Thanks for watching. Take care.